Allow me to introduce you to Adama.
Atlanta is the Black Mecca. We know this already. We are home to people of African descent and the epicenter of arts and culture.
But where can you go to experience Black art and culture, illuminating the depth and breadth of the African diaspora?
Launched in March 2020 as a museum without walls, Adama quickly emerged as a space that is already engaged in communities around the world.
The best part about being a founding member of Adama
is knowing that I'm part of making history.
By contributing to Adama, you're joining a global community of dreamers and builders,
bringing forth a world-class museum
that highlights the Black global experience.
And it's all happening here.
Right here.
Right here.
Right here, right now.
Right here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Join us.
Give.
And get involved.
Adama.
Hallo, guten Tag und herzlich willkommen. Welcome to the Goethe-Zentrum Atlanta and Adama. I'm glad to see all of you behind your cameras, on the screen, or here in the Goethe-Zentrum. We are currently hosting an exhibition called Democracy Will Win. Why are we doing this? Because we are a German cultural center and our mission is to promote the German language, but also to promote German culture and to contribute to important local discussions like democracy, or like today, Black Lives in Germany, colonialism. And I am very happy to also welcome Onyx Henry here, of who we will hear a little bit more in a little bit. You will find the Goethe-Zentrum Atlanta in the middle, in the heart of Atlanta and downtown. Feel free to just come in once you are here, or check out our website, German-Institute.org. Today is the kickoff of our series, Black Life in Germany. And this is really exciting. We're thinking hard, and we found a great project manager to work with us on a series of events, of which this is the first one. What do we want to achieve with this? First of all, we want to inform you, the Americans and other nationalities here in America, about the diversity of Germany. We are not all blonde and blue-eyed. We don't have the same backgrounds. We are actually a diverse country now. But also, and maybe much more important, is the fact that we want to see, to find out, to research, to understand what are the similarities and what are the differences in being Black in Germany or being Black in Atlanta and the Southeast and America. With all of that said, I give the microphone to Onyx.
Thank you, Oliver. Good morning and guten Abend to everyone. So as Oliver was mentioning, from now through December 2022, the Goethe-Zentrum in Atlanta is hosting a Thomas Mann-based exhibit called Democracy Will Win. What spaces are we fighting for? When I first learned of this exhibit, I immediately wondered, who is the we fighting for spaces? Whose voices are actually being heard and valued? And where is race in these conversations? What came to mind thereafter was a walking tour that I participated in during my year in Berlin as a Fulbright scholar. On this tour through Berlin's so-called African Quarter, the guide from the grassroots organization called Berlin Postcolonial shared information about Germany's colonial endeavors in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, while also pointing out the lingering traces of this little discussed history. Among the present-day connections highlighted were street signs that essentially laud white German colonial officers who notoriously mistreated and murdered countless Africans. Similar to recent debates in the United States regarding the removal of monuments dedicated to known races, the suggestions to rename certain sites in Berlin that reference anti-Blackness have been greatly disputed. But there has been some success. We had planned to hear from Mnyaka Sururu today, but due to unforeseen circumstances, his colleague Christian Knopp is joining us instead. Christian, an activist and historian, has been working with Berlin Postcolonial since its founding in 2007, and is also currently collaborating with the team on a long-term project called Decolonial, Memory, Culture in the City. Before I pass the virtual mic over to Christian, please, if you have any questions for the Q&A session, please simply type them into the chat at any time during the presentation. Thank you. Christian?
Even whether it, though it is still light at your place. Thank you very much for having me. I have to excuse myself right from the beginning, as I'm just a bad substitute of my Tanzanian Berlin-based colleague Mnyaka Sururu Mboro, as Onyx already mentioned. He is fallen sick, so I wasn't able to prepare a real speech or longer speech, but if you don't have a concept, you certainly look for pictures. So I brought you quite a lot of pictures, and I tried to show you all of them and comment on them. And I hope you will get an impression about the subject and what we are up to, and in what we are engaged have been engaged for many years in Berlin. Concerning the question, the controversial question of street names. Could you please show me the first picture? This is not the first, I think. Or maybe it is. Okay, then I start with it. Obviously, I have a different version of the slideshow. But anyway, I wanted to start with her in any case. What the person you see is Maya Yim, a very important and kind of very prominent Black activist from Berlin. She has died in 1996, committing suicide as a very young person, just in the middle of her 30s. And you see her in the beginning of the 1990s in front of one of the most controversial streets or street names, which is also the name giver for a tube station or an underground station in Berlin. We call it the M Street, as we don't want to use the word Moor as it would be translated. A description of and a rather old or historical description by white people of Black persons in Germany. And she was one of the first who found this controversial and spoke out against it. But she also mentioned other street names honoring colonial pioneers, I would say, or one should better call them colonial criminals, important persons within the history of German colonialism. Could you please show the next picture? Yeah, here you see a collection of some of them from rather old books, most of them published during the era of the Nazi regime in the 1930s, being printed in big numbers for the German population and celebrating the German colonizers, but also colonial traders, forerunners of German colonialism in the 19th century, like the rulers of Brandenburg and Prussia, so-called Africa scientists, and military officers, being responsible for German colonialism. If you look at the picture on the left, you see how this was done in a very nationalist vein, giving the impression that Africa was in a way discovered by Germans, or explored by Germans, though we all know that, of course, there were other explorers coming from other European countries as well. So this was the interpretation given by the Nazi regime of the German part in the exploration of Africa. Next picture, please. Oh, here he comes. This is where I wanted to start with. This is showing my colleague Mnyaka Sururu Mboro, who is not here today, cannot be here today, at his work. He used to be a friend of Maya Yim, the Black actress and activist I showed you before, and he, in a way, continued. Together with others, he continued her work, her criticism of Berlin street names. And you see him during one of the many guided tours he has done over the last 15 years in the so-called African quarters, but also in other parts of Berlin. Next picture, please. As I said, we organize guided tours through this city, not only dealing with street names, but also with other traces of German colonialism, and trying to use them as the impulses for getting deeper into colonial history, the colonial history of Berlin. But concerning the street names, we have been participating in doing research work on the name givers of these colonial street names. So we published together with a much more important NGO called the Initiative of Black People in Germany, ISD. And together with some other NGOs, we published in 2008 this kind of short handout telling the as much as we could find out about the biographies, or what was important about the biographies of those who are still honored in Berlin, who were still honored at this place. And we spotted out more than 45 streets related to German colonialism, in a way glorifying it, or at least kind of commemorating the colonial regions. But there were 12 street names, as far as I remember, where we said these street names are honoring central colonial figures and should be renamed, as all the others might be commented upon. These should be renamed and given new names. So this was our message from this booklet we published. Next, please. Yeah, thank you. It didn't take very long that one of the districts in Berlin, and the question of naming and renaming streets is a decision of is in the responsibility of the districts of Berlin, which is special in a way in Germany, as usually the city councils decide. It gives you gave us the opportunity or possibility to be successful in at least those districts of Berlin where the political parties are more sympathetic to the cause of changing street names and about Black activism as well. So the rather famous Kreuzberg district reacted to this booklet I talked about and singled out one proposal we had to change the street name Gröbenufer into Mayayim Ufer, Mayayim, the lady I talked about. The idea behind it was that we didn't just want to change street names or let them disappear, but we wanted to use a new or introduce a new possibility, a new perspective on German colonialism and on resistance, on the resistance movement against it. So we proposed to exchange the names and to keep the relation to German colonialism and colonial history, but giving it a new, completely new and opposite direction of this commemoration. So that's why we introduced or proposed Mayayim as the new name giver of the Gröbenufer. The Gröbenufer, for your short explanation, was honoring a guy you see in the picture here. He was the first governor of an enslavement fortress in Ghana, which was set up by the Brandenburg Prussian rulers in the late 17th century, when they tried for at least 30 years to take part in the enslavement trade and deported around 20,000 Western African people to the Caribbean. You see one of Gröben's young Black servants in the corner of the picture. So he definitely brought enslaved children to Germany as well. And you see him holding the grounding, how you call this, a drawing showing the fortress in Ghana called Great Fredericksburg, which is still in existence today. So you could visit it. It is the only enslavement fortress of a German state in Western Africa. It is today called Princestown. So we were successful in changing this street name. Next, please. This was in 2009 or 10. But most of the other streets were situated or are situated in the so-called African Quarter in Berlin. In fact, there's a number of more than 20 street names in a way glorifying German colonial rule in Africa. So that's why I put African Quarter in brackets. It's not an official name, and it's even a misleading and euphemistic name, as it should rather be called Colonial Quarter or Colonial German African Colonial Quarter, as it is, of course, not honoring any African countries or persons, but doing actually the opposite of this. I talked about street names like the Cameroon Street or the Togo Street, commemorating the former German colonies and trying to bring close to the German population at the brink from the 19th to the 20th century, the idea of colonialism to the people, especially to the working class people living in this area in Wedding. But there are 3 streets which were among those we singled out for a change, and I will introduce them to you if I can see the next picture, please. Oh, it's different as well. Maybe one more. And one more. Yeah, this is right. Thank you very much. This is showing a collage done in the 1930s, glorifying a tobacco trader from Bremen called Adolf Lüderitz, and he was the name giver to the Lüderitzstraße in Berlin. And he was celebrated for being the founder, the so-called founder of the colony German Southwest Africa, which is today Namibia. A second person, which would be seen on the next picture, please, is Gustav Nachtigall. He was celebrated as the founder of the German colonies Togo and Cameroon. He was in fact a kind of Africa explorer. Before that, later on becoming one of the top officials of the German government, of the colonial department, and was sent to Cameroon and Togo to rise the flag, as you see on the picture there, and to formally install German colonial rule in Western Africa, in those parts where it was still possible, as there was a big competition between the French and the British and the Germans, all trying to seize colonial territories. And he is the name giver of today's Nachtigallplatz. And next picture, please. And a third person is Karl Peters, seen as the founder of German East Africa, which is today Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. And there's a special note to this street name, as it was not given during Germany's colonial rule or time at the late 19th and early 20th century. But rather it was that Karl Peters was so such a controversial figure in his time, being certainly one of the most racist criminals in German colonial service, that nobody would have had the idea to, or at least not the Berlin City Council would have had the idea to honor him with a street name. It was only in the 1930s, actually in 1939, very few weeks before the Nazi regime started World War II, that he was honored in the so-called African Quarter with a street name. So this was in direct preparation of empires the Germans envisaged to rule and to conquer in the attempt, or this was part of the attempt to take to single out colonial pioneers as examples for the German youth in the 1930s. So he was too controversial for his own time, even for this racist colonial regime in the early 20th century, but honored by the National Socialist Party. What you see there also is a short explanation sign saying that Professor Dr. Hans Peters is honored here with the street name, which is not true, but which kind of documents an attempt by the district council in the late 1980s to get rid of criticism concerning the street name. So they decided to, how they call it, to interpret it as, or to give it a new name, to add a name of a different person with the surname Peters to the street name, and to cover up the true story of this name, without being obliged to change the street name. Could you please show me the next picture? Thank you very much. When we started to give our tours in the so-called African Quarter and demanded the renaming of streets, there was, you can imagine, not much enthusiasm about this, neither amongst the inhabitants of the so-called African Quarter, which is a predominantly white quarter, of course, and area, nor amongst the politicians being afraid of losing voters in the district. So what they were willing to offer was a solution which we saw as a rather first step, to install and erect a kind of information board, which you see here, to tell the story of the so-called African Quarter and the story of the street names, and that there were not just innocent names, but directly propagating or displaying German colonial propaganda. And they proposed this information board, and then there was a kind of argument about who was to write the text on this. The district just invited 2 or 3 politicians who were not really in the subject and who wrote a text we couldn't accept from civil society groups and Black community groups, and then after a while we proposed an own version of this, which was not acceptable to the district, as it was talking about racism and the present. So then someone came up with the decision or with a proposal to have an information board with 2 texts on the same subject, 2 histories of the, or 2 stories of the so-called African Quarter, which we accepted as the main thing for us was that our own version would be printed and displayed in public. So you have a very strange or remarkable information board still standing in the so-called African Quarter with 2 texts on it, only with this compromise we were able to introduce our own text, which we found sad enough, as it was would have been of course more fair or polite or fitting to invite the Black community activists who were acting for change in the district and criticizing the German colonialism and telling its story, to write the text themselves. But this was not, at this time at least, not acceptable for the district. So could you please show the next picture? Thank you very much. As I said, our intention from the beginning was not only to change street names and to make them disappear or make German colonial history in public space disappear, but we always proposed to highlight known or rather unknown personalities of anti-colonial resistance against the German rule, instead of these colonial, the honoring of these colonial perpetrators. So we were always keen on finding persons who were very closely related in a way to the recent name giver of, or the present name giver of the streets, and to introduce them as substitutes or new proposals. So we wanted to keep to stay close to the original story, but give these stories a turn, and honor resistance fighters instead. So one of our proposals was for Lüderitz Street, honoring the founder of German Southwest Africa, today's Namibia, was Captain Cornelius Fredericks, which was a resistance fighter of the Nama people, and being one of the most feared military leader of the Nama by the Germans. He was with his people, he was put into a concentration camp, one of the first concentration camps, I think, in world history, and one of the a greater number of concentration camps the Germans erected in today's Namibia. And it was actually at the concentration camp in today's city called Lüderitz, in the Lüderitz Bay, where this Captain Cornelius Fredericks was imprisoned, and in the end, after 2 years of imprisonment, killed. Like so many Nama and Herero people in these German concentration camps during the genocide against their people, which was in 1904 to 1908. Cornelius Fredericks is honored by his descendants at the Shark Island, at the territory of the former concentration camp at Shark Island. We thought it would be a fitting proposal, and proposed it to some of the Nama activists we are in contact with as well, and they replied that they would accept this as a good solution and a better solution than we have at the moment, like the Lüderitzstraße. This was one of the proposals. A second one you could see if we carry on to the next picture, please. A second proposal was to substitute Nachtigallplatz, honoring the founder of the colonies of Togo and Cameroon, by the name Mangabellplatz, and this would be referring to the couple of Emily and Rudolf Douala Mangabell, being former rulers of the Douala in Cameroon, and bringing with them the important story of Rudolf being a pupil, being sent to Germany as a young man, being a pupil and a student in some German cities, being fluent in German, in the German language, and coming back to Cameroon to be the ruler of the Douala, and fighting the German, or struggling with the German colonial administration in a very peaceful, I would say, manner, using German laws and lobbying German politicians to promote the case of the Douala people. It didn't help him. He was executed in 1940 after, I would say, a rather shameful court decision on the spot in Cameroon. And he and many of his followers, actually many of the elite of the Douala people and other ethnic groups in Cameroon as well, were executed shortly before World War I, and before the Germans had to leave the colony and to give it up, which to the later mandatory powers like France and Britain. So this would, we hope, do justice to Rudolf Douala Mangabell and his wife Emily. And you see a Berlin-based Cameroonian activist woman proudly showing the new street sign which we produced very much before the decision was taken to change the street, really change the street. The next picture, please. Thirdly, and almost finally, there was the proposition to change one street in honor of Ana Mungunda. Ana Mungunda was a Herero woman. She was not killed by the Germans during the genocide, but she lived as she lived in the 1940s, 50s, and until the late 1950s. In 1959, she was shot by the South African apartheid regime during an uprising in Katutura in today's Windhoek, as the Overherero and other ethnic groups who were living in Windhoek where the regime tried to force new living places on them and to drive them away from their old districts. So there was an uprising, which was a very important event for the upcoming resistance movement and militant resistance movement of the SWAPO and other parties against the apartheid regime from South Africa, who was treating Namibia as a colony. And this was one of the beginnings. This uprising there in the city of Windhoek, and Ana Mungunda was amongst these 12 people. She was the only woman who was killed during the turning down of the uprising, which was called I think it was called, I don't remember the name, but it was called a massacre done by the apartheid regime. So our intention was to propose a Herero woman as well, beside a Nama person, as there is a special responsibility, we thought, of Germany relating to the Overherero and Nama as them being the most prominent victims of the genocide, losing many people or members of their communities in the early 20th century. And the next picture, please. And the last name we proposed was for the Peters Allee was Maji Allee. I told you that Karl Peters, the old and still actual or recent name giver, was seen as and celebrated as the founder of German East Africa. And what we proposed instead is the Maji Allee, referring to the biggest uprising or resistance movement against Germany as a colonial power in the whole history of German colonialism, in fact, which took place in southern Tanzania in the early 20th century, in 1905 to 1907, where not less than 20 language communities of the inhabitants of southern Tanzania raised or rose up against the Germans. And the name of this uprising or resistance movement, Maji, comes from the Kiswahili word Maji for water, as there was what connected these people in their fight against the German was a kind of holy water or medicine, which was the medium they transported from community to community and the symbol for their rising. The Germans put this uprising down as they did, almost as they did the resistance movement in today's Namibia, with methods which came close to a genocide, though it was not stated as an intention to wipe out these communities. Historians judge that or estimate that 100,000 to 300,000 people died in this putting down because of the brutal German reaction to this war against their rule in southern Tanzania. Next picture, please. I would, before I talk about this special case of a street name, a controversial street name in Berlin, I would like to add that after, is it almost 15 years now, the district in Berlin Mitte decided to change these street names. I've portrait to you or shown to you. So in 2018, they decided to take up our proposals and to change 3 street names to have 4 new ones. At all these names you have already seen on the display now. But it still took a couple of years as many inhabitants complained against this in an official way, and some even went to court. So we had to wait until very recently, and it's only now that 4 weeks ago or so that we were informed that at least 2 streets can be renamed now. So we will have new names on the 2nd of December in 2022. And we will have a couple of further month for the 3rd street name, the Petersallee, to be changed into Maji Maji Allee and Anna Mungunda Allee. The special case I wanted to talk about, a special case of a street name in Berlin is the M Street. I've already introduced it as Maya Yim was shown on the picture in front of the street name, and the underground station equally named like, or similarly named like the street. I told you that the M word was the historical or the white Germans' historical disrespectful name for Black people in Germany. So that is one of the reasons why it is criticized by almost all Black community members I know who are politically active in Berlin and outside the city as well. But there is also another reason for their criticism, as the name goes back to the time when Black people in Germany were treated, not living there on a voluntary basis, but were in a way captured and kept as servants, or rather as enslaved people in Germany. So it's a painful reminder of this story of enslavement of Black people in Germany as well. So if you show me the next picture, you can get an impression of how the first members of we could even say the first members of a Berlin Black community, what their tasks were in the households, in the courts of the Prussian or Brandenburgian nobility. If you look closer to this cabinet, a painting of a cabinet, you see that the royal couple in the middle and the nobility are having tobacco pipes, and it was obviously very important for them to have not just servants but black servants from Western Africa to serve them and with tobacco and to bring tea or coffee to them. So it was for prestigious reason or representational reasons that the nobility was very keen on having these servants from other parts of the world, and especially from Africa, but also from Oriental countries, like the Ottoman Empire. As you see, one servant wearing a turban there, and obviously having the task to play an Oriental person. And the next picture, please. Okay, and this is the more shocking the story of the fate of black persons in Germany very early in the late 17th century onward, as this picture of black juvenile or even childlike servants has been transported over the decades and over the centuries in the German public mind. You see here a promotional a logo, or I don't know how to call it, a label for a very famous kind of chocolate in Germany, and everybody knows this so-called Sarotti M. If you ask around, and here it is presented on one of the former factories for the Sarotti chocolate, still presented in public, and you see how this fantasy of willing black servants, this colonial fantasy, has been transported over so many years, and is in this way even related to the M Street I was talking about, as the first seat or place of the Sarotti factory was in the street, so in the M Street. So it was a kind of inspiration for this logo, to refer back to the black early black servants in the 17th century. So I think I'm through. Is there one more picture? Yeah, there is one more picture, and I would rather finish on an optimistic note. We were also successful in changing this street name, not yet, though it seems to be celebrated here on the picture by Sharon Dodo Otu, a famous black activist and writer, a novel writer in Berlin. The decision was already taken to change the street name, but here, as in the case of the African Quarter, we still have to wait until the courts have decided on the complaints of inhabitants of the street who were against these changings. So we don't know actually when we will have an Anton Wilhelm Amo Street, which we proposed. And the last thing I would say is that Anton Wilhelm Amo is very closely connected to the story of the former street name Emstraße, as Anton Wilhelm Amo was taken from West Africa to Germany as a child in the early 18th century. So he was one of these young black servants you saw on the picture, not on this picture, but in a very equal situation. And he had the almost singular chance to get education in Europe, and was supported by his ruler, and even sent to university, where he became a university professor and teacher. as far as I know, he was the first black academic in Germany, and he taught at one of Prussia's universities in Halle. And we even know that one of his subjects of his disputations was named the situation, or was dealing with the situation, the legal situation of Black people in Europe. And it is very obvious, though it is not transmitted, or it is not existent anymore, the disputation and the treaty he wrote and discussed with his students. Still, we know that he was arguing about, or he was promoting the abolition of the status of slavery in Europe, and was arguing that in the Roman Empire there were even accepted Black kings. So if the Roman law would be important for the German law, which it was, then there shouldn't be any difference between white and Black people in Germany. So he was trying to contribute to the legal security of Black persons in Europe at the time, which was, to say the best, unclear whether they could be treated as slaves or not. They were very much in between, and certainly not free to go back to where they were born or wherever they wanted. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm done now, and looking forward for questions.
Thank you so much, Christian, for your very, very informative talk, even on short notice. It was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So we have a couple of questions. I'm going to start with one that came in through LinkedIn. Again, if you have any questions, you can type them in and show up somewhere and I will read it. So the first question is asking about what do you call it? The board that you have in vetting that goes over the history, the one that was erected a few decades ago. So someone was curious about whether or not the board is historically true, and that, or that is one side historically true and the other side made to kind of make, the oppressor feel good? Is it kind of one side is more politically correct while the other one is more honest? What is your take on that?
It's certainly showing that history is a thing you can debate, and everybody's got his own truth in a way and interpretation of that. And you can imagine that the district was not too keen on being too self-critical about it. So the first sentence I remember was something like, the African Quarter is very special, or a singular place in the world, or something. It very much tasted like a holiday, a tourist promotion stuff. And we said, no, but we are talking about, slavery and genocide and racism in the presence as well. So that's why we couldn't come together on this.
Okay.
In the end, the district very much looked at our text and changed it more and more. So they became closer and closer. But there's still, at least amongst others, there's the difference that we have African Quarter in brackets, kind of distancing ourselves from the name, while the district didn't do this, and you still use the misleading name African Quarter.
Okay. Progress is gradual, so we'll take it and keep moving forward. I have a question that's it's one question kind of in two parts, I think. So the first part was, what kind of pushback or arguments exactly did you guys encounter? Like, what was the language of the pushback that you guys received regarding changing street names? And then the second part of it is that, given how Germany has dealt with its Holocaust history and installed Stolpersteine throughout, I just was wondering what is the temperature on the pushback for changing the street signs? Like, there's obviously, for me, from my perspective, there's obviously some anti-Blackness that's wrapped up in there, because both of these things seem to be dealing with, addressing the past and trying to right some of the wrongs. So yeah, those are my kind of two questions.
Yeah, I think the Stolpersteine and street names are very different in this thing, in this relation, or as I would guess that very few people would be upset or even would care. In the worst case, they wouldn't just care about the Stolpersteine. It doesn't hurt many people, but it's very different if you propose to change the name of a street someone is living in. It's for older people. It tends to be a part of their personality. At least it looks like this, and this is how they argued. And of course, you will be seen as a foreigner intruding, or someone stranger coming and taking away something, and criticizing your former living there without being critical about the name. So we confronted much even racist attacks on this. Mboro could tell you, my colleague could tell you stories about verbal attacks, but also physical attacks when he's doing guided tours by upset inhabitants of the quarter. The arguments are varying from not being critical about German colonialism and having a different opinion on these guys, on these criminals, up to very rather practical things, saying, well, this is expensive, it's causing costs for the district and also for myself, as I live in the street and I have to change my passport and so on. So all these things, but I was shocked, in fact, in both cases, in the African Quarter, but also with the M Street, how energetic and how vibrant the criticism of the decision to change it would be. I never thought that people could really get crazy about a street name, which is just one street name. I can see why the Black community is getting crazy about the M Street, but I don't see how any white guy is raging about the street he just couldn't care about. So, but it's not what we found out. So there's much opposition, it partly has to do with the district not being willing or able to deal with the whole matter in a professional way. I guess there were not real good comrades to us or cooperation partners. They did this without consulting us, any new measures, and they didn't explain too much to the inhabitants. So it's seen as a rather selfish decision without democratic discussions being around it. Though we can say that at least for 15 years we have been talking about this and invited people to come to meetings and information events.
Interesting. I had not thought about the practical implications of changing the street names for the residents, but I would dare to say that, murdering tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people is probably more expensive than whatever personal issues people have, but that's my perspective. Just wanted to see if there were any questions in the room, and we have one. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Good morning. My name is Esther. And so thank you for debating on a very, I say, bold topic about German colonialism. Coming from a country that was colonized by Germany. My comment is that we've appreciated German rules because it was indirect rules, and what was left as legacy was kind of like recalled when we wanted to challenge others to do better. And I was really surprised that here we've got African countries, but we also have African street in Germany and also on. So my question today is, usually the streets are linked to heroes.
Yeah.
Where not the case, because like you have heroes who have fought for maybe independencies, who have fought for this. So you've got National that we mentioned, is a whole street in some of the provinces in our countries. So I'm like, how far could we go into naming the streets and everything? Maybe you are Marietta Street, Lucky Street, and everything. So I want to first of all stop and say congratulations for having a certain progress. But I think we can go further and dig a little bit and find those heroes that have been able to make the history and recall their name. Not only Germans, not only Africans, but real true heroes, and among them also some of the women. So thank you.
So, as far as I understand, that was kind of more of a comment than a question, or is the question like, how can we continue the progress of renaming streets? Is that
the question and a comment?
Okay, it's a question and a comment. So yeah, so in case the audio was a little off, there was congratulations on the progress that has been made, connections made between things that are named in Africa after Germans who were colonists, to the German street names that are named after them as well. Are there any talks about what can be done also right now that you know of, Christian, or are there other things in the works, or is this kind of like one of the main campaigns in regard to trying to add to the history of German colonialism that people are aware of?
Well, it is one of the main campaigns, but we have always been clear, or for us it has always been also been an instrument for raising a broader discussion on German colonialism, on racism yesterday and today. And it proved to be a very fitting tool to initiate such a debate. If you come out with such a, this was our experience, if you come out with such a proposal to change not only one but 3 street names in a quarter, it raises many people, and you have discussion. I mean, before we started our guided tours or regular tours there was very little knowledge even by the inhabitants of the street and people living in the quarter about the street names. They didn't know where these people were. So I remember Nachtigallplatz is the German word for nightingale. It's a surname in this case, but people told us, but this is about a bird, and it's not about Gustav Nachtigall. They didn't know him. So in a way, it shows it was used as a tool for rather an educational and discursive practice we had in mind. And I remember one politician, a district politician, and there was a discussion, and she was asked by opponents of the renaming of the streets, and she was confronted with saying that the people from the audience, they said, but you yourself 2 years ago you voted against the renaming of the street names. And she said, yes, but so what? This is 2 years later, and I've learned about the street name and learned about what these guys were responsible for, and I have a different opinion now. And I found this very impressive. I mean, she was above 70 years old and a white lady, but she was obviously able to learn and take on things. So this is what we were up to. of course, to have this broader discussion, and we always have to do with other important discussions as well, like especially on human remains or ancestral remains being robbed in former German colonies and brought in thousands to Germany, being still there, and at some places still being used for research work. I remember that we were supporting the attempt of Ovaherero Nama activists to watch their ancestors or the skulls of their ancestors, and they were answered by the museum in Berlin, you are not allowed to enter the building and see them because you are not scientists. So just imagine, you know, there's so much to do and to carry on these discussions, which are very important, and the task has not yet started. I mean, to return them, for instance, just a very few have gone back, so on. So there are many other discussions we are in, but street names is certainly a prominent debate.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, there's a lot more that we could talk about in regards to the returning of the human remains and the Humboldt Forum and how things are represented in the Humboldt Forum as well, but we're not going to have time for that today. But yes, I think the street names is actually a really relevant place to start, just because everybody, you know, since the topic, you know, started overall with democracy, like everybody has access to that. Everybody can, well, all seeing people can see the street signs. Everybody knows what the street signs are, or what they say rather. And I think that it is important to address things that people, you know, encounter in their everyday lives and are confronted with that they don't necessarily have to be, you know? And so that is awesome that you guys have made the progress that you have. And I hope that you continue to make more. If there's any more questions in the room, I don't see any more questions in the chat. I have one more, and maybe there will be another after that. And if not, then we can end early, because I'm not opposed to that. So I have kind of a personal question, if it's okay. And it is, because we talked about this earlier, so I should just address this. So I wanted specifically a Black German to do this presentation, because I don't want to represent Black Germans, as I myself am not one. My research deals with representations of Black Germans, or Blackness, in post-war German children's and youth literature. But Mr. Mboro wasn't a Black German, but he was a Black person. And so I felt like his voice was also appropriate for this conversation. And given that he's sick, we have you now, Christian, and we're glad to have you. But I was really wanting to know, how is it that you, as a white man, I'm assuming that you identify as a white man, is that correct? Okay. How is it that you check yourself as a white man while doing this work? I think that a lot of white people often have the question of how they can be, you know, good allies, or how to not be too much in the way, how to use their voices and their platforms to advance anti-racist work, as you and your organization are doing.
I guess I try to be rather supportive than being on the front page. That's why I would have seen Mboro with you. It would have been much, I would have loved to see Mboro to talk to you. As you know, he's a kind of mentor for me for many years, and I've learned so much from him. That yeah, I'm very conscious about this. What we have decided upon is that when we talked about the issue, which is important for him as well, that it is only in exceptional cases that we or I would be speaking just for myself or alone. So usually he's doing the guided tours either on his own or we are doing it together. It is just if he is sick and not able to attend. And I'm very glad with this, as we had so many interpretations of German or colonial history in general by elderly white guys, that it's no loss if there's one less, but it would be a big loss to have to not to have his voice in German public. So this is what I can tell concerning this question.
Thank you.
I don't know whether it is answering your question really.
No, I think that you very much did. I appreciate it. From what I gathered, I would summarize what you said as, being in a support role, that is most important to you as a white person working in anti-racist spaces. Making sure that you are knowledgeable about what's going on so that you can step in moments like this, but making sure that yours is not the face of representation, because it shouldn't be, and I appreciate that. So maybe, I hope that we can invite Mr. Mboro back for another event. And so we're wrapping up now, and I just wanted to share with everyone that, as Oliver mentioned earlier, we're planning a Black Life in Germany series. And I actually recently discovered that the ESD, the Initiative Schweizer Deutsch, is actually doing something very similar to how we wanted to kick off our series. And so I'm hoping that maybe we could partner with them. Maybe Christian, you know somebody who put me in contact with. And so we are hoping in February to have a series of events that will be posted on Facebook and the Goethe website for people to register at. So stay tuned for more details about that. Before we close, I want to thank Oliver. I want to thank Stephanie Fleming at Adama, which is the African Diaspora Art Museum of Atlanta. And thank you for everybody who has logged in and everybody who has showed up in person. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Vielen Dank.
All right. Take care, everybody.